Dear students of MA second semester, I welcome you here in this second lecture on John Keats, and the poem is Ode on a Grecian Urn. As in my previous lecture, last point I was discussing, it was influences or impact on John Keats. So we noticed that Chaucer, Boccaccio, Spenser, Hellenism, that means Greek art and culture, how it was dominant over the mind of the Keats. But the beautiful aspect or beautiful nature of Keats, the way he has synthesized all these influences, it is very unique and laudable. Not only this, when we are talking about the power of synthesis of Keats, we must here quote Coleridge, as the way Coleridge is talking about primary imagination and secondary imagination. Primary imagination, which is the power of which is present in everyone, but secondary imagination is the power and unique quality or gift of a poet only. So Keats is blessed with that secondary imagination, with the power of synthesis, dissolve, diffuse and dissipate in order to recreate. So if you look at the poems of Keats, you find that magical world, musical world, so magic, music, melody, mesmerizing impact that we all have. By no other poet in the past we experience so it is the poetic talent or poetic gift of Keats that we experience in any of his poem. When we compare Keats with any other romantic poet, either with Shelley or with Wordsworth, how do we find him different than the others? First and foremost, if you compare him with Shelley, the kind of craftsmanship that Keats has got and the kind of self-control, self-discipline that Keats is having in terms of his feeling, emotion and craftsmanship, it is really unique and appreciable. And if you look at Shelley, these things, this kind of, he is having a kind of eccentricity and he is a romantic in a different way. So, although all the romantics are important, but these are the unique features of Keats, and he is very important, holding very important position in the entire romantic world. Now when we are discussing Keats as a poet or some of the features of Keats's poetry, to continue that, I will say that the chief aspect, or we may say that in the theory of poetry of Keats, the two important terms or two important words are there: his concept of beauty and his idea of sensuousness. The concept of beauty cannot be separated with his idea of sensuousness, but still I am trying to make you understand his concept of beauty. Beauty is something that is not away from goodness, that is not away from truth. So you know, in Grecian and also beauty is truth and truth is beauty, it comes, that means what is beautiful, it must be true, and what is true, it is definitely beautiful. And how this truthfulness and beautifulness is determined, it is on the basis of the goodness. So Keats is of the opinion that the bad things, the ill factors of life, ill factors of society, evil of the society, they must be overcome only by focusing on the beauty. So the gruesome aspect of life, grisly, gruesome, grotesque, all these elements, macabre elements, all these elements of the society and life, it must be overlooked, and we should only focus on beauty. And this is the remedy, this is the solution that Keats has provided. You know, he is writing very beautifully, beauty lies in the eyes of beholder. That means beauty is not in the object that you see. Beauty is inside you, the way you are looking at something, the way you are trying to understand something. So if you are able to perceive beauty in the so-called ugly world, then only real beauty you are perceiving. So beauty in the ugly faces, beauty in the ugly aspects of life, when you are able to see beauty, only then you can follow this idea of Keats or this idea of Shakespeare or this idea of Shelley also, where they believe over the the eventual overcome from this bad aspect of life or from the evils of the society. So Shelley is talking differently, that how by being revolutionary one can overcome the evils of the life. Keats is talking that through this concept of beauty, by realizing this sense of uniqueness, one may overcome the evils of the society, or one may overlook. So we have a poem by Sri Aurobindo, epical poem, that is Savitri. And in Savitri, very beautifully, Aurobindo writes that Satyavan and Savitri, they are not poles apart, rather they are one, and they have come down here on this earth just to change the whole human race into divine race. So in the same way, beauty is that key, beauty is that kernel idea through which perhaps Keats want to suggest that we may change the entire human world into the divine world. So beauty contains in itself divinity. When we move ahead and we have to look after one another example, we may say in Endymion, a thing of beauty, joy forever. So Keats is talking about beauty which is permanent, which is of universal nature, not of that beauty which is perishable with time. So physical beauty and immortal beauty, spiritual beauty, beauty of soul, beauty of virtue, beauty of goodness. He's talking about that beauty, because physical beauty is, it just dies with the time. So a thing of beauty, joy forever. A thing, an idea, an object, a person who is permanently beautiful is actually beautiful. And as we all know that anything in this world which is perishable or which is going to die with time, it is not a permanent nature. Only the idea that is away from the decay is going to be beautiful. So Keats's poetry is itself example of a thing of beauty, joy forever. So as we know that Keats is not here, he is no more, but his poems are actually example of beautifulness and the loveliness. And that beautifulness and loveliness, these are the measuring scales upon which poetry can be written and the whole world can be measured. So if you want to measure the society, if you want to measure the world, you may measure it with the Keats's poems. These are some of the lines through which I try to make you understand his concept of beauty. Now when we are talking about his sensuousness, he is called as the poet of sensuousness. And the way he is writing about sensuousness, it may appear to you startling. He says that the writing ignites with the senses. Now, how this writing ignites with the senses? Like senses, when they start functioning, only then there is birth of emotion and imagination in the mind of poet. So Keats says that this five senses, they are source of depicting sublimity in the form of poetry. For example, if you look at the Keats's Ode to Nightingale, and he is listening the song of Nightingale, so definitely ear is working, and maybe that he is looking also at Nightingale, so sitting in the garden, so maybe that his eye is also working. So the moment he listens the song of Nightingale, his imagination gets fire, the hot plate of imagination is activated, and he starts writing. The moment he starts writing, the moment he starts composing, he goes deep down into his thought and idea, and this is how these senses are enabling him to enter in the world of imagination, and that provokes his emotion, and then he is able to listen in this mortal song of Nightingale, eternal song of Nightingale. So he is perceiving note of eternity in the song of Nightingale. In the same way, if you look at your poem Ode on Grecian Urn, what happens that Keats visited a museum that is there in the Britain, and in the museum the Greek art and culture, it is portrayed there. So by his imagination and just by looking those art and picture, by his mind he goes back in the Greek culture, and he starts imagining, and on that basis of imagination he is perceiving how over the surface layer of the urn certain beautiful carvings are there, and he goes on to extend like the melodious music that these timbrels and pipes are playing, please play, and he is able to listen the song that is played there. So the point is that in both the poems, how this paramount state that he depicts in his imagination is possible. It ignites or it begins with his power of senses or the power of sensuousness. Besides this, we may say that Keats's power of imagination, it means what poet sees and hears, it ignites his emotion and imagination, and that finally results into poetry. If you compare him with the other romantic poets, how he is different in terms of his sensuousness. You know about Wordsworth, that Wordsworth goes there in his lap of nature, in the world of nature, and entering in the world of nature, he says that ear and, in fact, poetry is the result of the ear and eyes, because basically the two senses he makes use of. Power of listening and power of seeing. So when he is in the world of Tinternabhe, he listens the song that is there in the chirping birds, and the way water is falling from the water is moving from the streams. So all these natural objects, they are producing sound, and he captures that in his mind and he presents that through words. So he says that my poetry is actually result of the or impression of eyes and ear. So you may notice that he has highlighted especially two senses, that is eye and ear. But as far as Keats's poetry is concerned, or Keats' approach to sensuousness, he makes use of all the five senses. So here he is different than the other romantic poets. And besides this, we may say that Keats provides philosophical nature, or philosophy is associated with his sensuousness. You know that in case of Wordsworth and in case of Keats both, this sensuousness is the power through which a poet is able to approach the deeper layer of cognizance. That means the faculty of understanding is opened, or it becomes more and more deep, more and more depth is there in the process of understanding through this journey of the senses. So Keats writes that sensuousness or senses are those power through which I perceive the greatest knowledge, universal knowledge, universal truth I perceive through these senses. And the duty of a poet is to render, to share through the words. So that he has done in his poetry. So I think the light that I have thrown here on his concept of beauty and sensuousness, it is important from the aspect of your university questions, because you may have in short or maybe in long like sensuousness and his concept of beauty. When you move ahead and you look at the idea of negative capability that is associated with his name, and you may think that idea of negative capability is originally described by Keats in relation to Shakespeare, and then why I am talking about negative capability here. So I just want to say that look how negative capability is functioning in all the poems of Keats. As you know that it means the power which a poet, which a dramatist or writer is having, through which he or she may completely bracket, completely avoid the senses, completely avoid his own self, and enters into the self of the poetry, enters into the self of character. So, you know, when you look at William Shakespeare and you find that how differently he is creating characters. One side there is Falstaff, another side Macbeth and Hamlet, and many such characters are there. So at a time it becomes difficult to understand that how one mind can create such a diverse character. So such creation of such a diverse characters is possible only when you have this power of negative capability, as John Keats defines in terms of William Shakespeare. But the same I am applying here, that if you have power of negative capability, then you can understand Grecian Earl. Then you can understand that how Keats was able to write Ode to Nightingale and Ode on Grecian Earl and many other poems, because here you have to negate your personality, your personal self, your problems, your worries, your care and your tension, and you have to enter into the world of imagination, and by entering there you have to forget all those things which are disturbing to you, and only then you can enjoy this negative capability. Besides this, before taking poetic lines, One important thing that I must share, that you may notice the form of poetry, the stanza pattern that is there, it is called Ode on Grecian urn. So ode is not very new, as I told you that ode is as I told you that he was inspired by the Greco-Roman culture. So he has followed this ode pattern, classical approach. But as far as this Grecian urn is concerned, his approach is very different, and he has invented a new stanza pattern in the ode, new way of writing he has chosen. So first let me tell you that ode is a serious, elevated in style, and always very serious subject matter is dealt in this form of poetry. So when we look at the ode, the pioneer or the founder is Pindar, and on whose name this stanza form is practiced. It is called as Pindaric ode or regular ode. So in regular ode, we notice that the way in Greek drama chorus they used to enter for singing and dancing. So the moment they are entering, they are going left and left to right, and then they are taking pause, that is called as epode. So this is the movement, how stanza goes from left, then right, and then in between it is strophe. This is called as regular pattern of ode, strophe, antistrophe, and epode. When you come to another version of this ode, that is irregular ode, and it is mastered by Abraham Cowley, who is a metaphysical poet. So in this irregular pattern of ode, we don't have proper triadic shape, rather the irregular length of the lines in one stanza we find. That is how we understand it is irregular ode. Keats made use of this Horatian ode in one of his poems, that is called Ode to Autumn. So another example we have, it is Horatian ode, that is homostrophic in nature. It means lines are of varying length, and there is conversation. In conversational tone, it is written. So Keats's Ode on Grecian urn is not in any of these categories. There are 10 lines in one stanza, and the rhyming pattern he has devised by his own. And the reason was that Keats felt problem in depicting pictorial quality in his poem when he was trying to adopt any of the pattern of the odes that was available. So he is focused on the selection of the images and symbols. So words, he is very peculiar after words. Just as you know, a poet, a painter is making painting, and the selection of the color is very important for creating impact. In the same way, when he is writing Grecian urn, he is very cautious regarding use of words, though it comes naturally to him because he is not a crafted poet. He's having excellency in his craftsmanship, that means of greater nature, but of very high degree imagination. Wordsworth produced. So he was very cautious regarding his delivery of the words, and the words are so appropriate that they are able to depict, they are able to portray the pictures that his mind is perceiving. So this is the reason that he gives title ode, because his connection or his love for the ancient form of writing. But when he started writing, he felt problem in that. So he has devised his own method, his own concept, and it is not certifying any of the previous discussed forms of the odes. So in my next lecture, I will come directly with explanation, and I hope these discussions are helpful to you for approaching the university questions. Still, if you have any doubt and a question, you may ask me. Thank you.